everyone, and welcome to Working Culture's Countdown to Business panel session. I'm your facilitator today, Mona Afshari, the Marketing and Communications Manager at Working Culture. And Working Culture is grateful to have the opportunity to collaborate with and support cultural workers in various traditional territories across Ontario. Though our office is located on land that is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, we deliver programs and partner with centers that are located on different traditional territories. And as the territory which our office is located on in Toronto was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes, we are committed to continue those sentiments when delivering workshops and continuing with the arts and culture communities across Ontario. So I want to tell you a little bit about Working Culture. So Working Culture's mission is to support the people who work in the cultural sector through lifelong career development and entrepreneurial and business skills training. And most people recognize us for our job board. However, we do provide the sector with various professional development programs, resources, and opportunities. For example, we do webinars and panels like this one to help you on your journey to becoming a creative entrepreneur. And now I'd like to introduce you to our moderator today, Snjezana Pruginic. Snjezana is a multidisciplinary creative professional working within the intersections of art, wellness, community, social justice, and entrepreneurship over 20 years. She's been with Working Culture for 3 years now, developing and facilitating workshops and webinars with us, and we are delighted to have her as our moderator today. And I also want to thank all the panelists who are here today with us to share their knowledge and their knowledge and all their experiences. So thanks everyone.
Okay, well, thank you, Mona. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to all the panelists. We're very excited to have you. I want to give just a little bit of a background to what this panel is a part of before I introduce the panelists to you, for anyone who is not familiar with it. We've been running workshops called CreativeBoost over the last 3 years across Ontario, which support creative artists and creative professionals in turning into creative businesses and taking the creative entrepreneurial journey in their life. So typically when we run these workshops in person, we always finish with a panel discussion of local artists or from the area and the region where we are running the sessions, because I feel that part of success is network and knowing people, talking to people, having experiences of others who've kind of gone on the journey as well. Since COVID, we've moved these onto online, and we've been lucky to be able to bring artists on the panels that previously we never had the opportunity, because none of our workshops were ever delivered in Toronto. They were always delivered in small rural towns. So I'm very happy to have everyone here on the panel. Thank you and welcome. I'm going to introduce them all to you, and then we're just going to go through a couple of questions. The questions are open to the entire panel to speak in any order that you like. I also allow and create space for the audience to ask at any point. You don't have to wait until the end. So if there is something that comes up for you and you want to ask, you're welcome to ask at any point. Just raise your hand and Mona will be moderating that. Otherwise, you can also keep your questions till the end and then ask anything that you want at that time. So let's just jump in. So I want to start us off with Melissa. Melissa, so if you can just wait, I mean, they can see your name as well. Melissa's passion and love for dance began at the young age of 4. Throughout her years, Melissa has been lucky to train in some of North America's top dance facilities with internationally known instructors. As a performer and choreographer, Melissa has worked with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, Ontario Raiders, Toronto FC, Canadian Music Week, International Dance Day, Dance Ontario Week, and with features on Breakfast Television, Omni, Daybreak TV, Much Music, Chin Radio, CRV Radio, amongst others. Melissa is a strong believer that dance and the arts play an important role in the upbringing of our children and youth. She actively coordinates, produces, and assists in various charitable dance-related events for organizations. She's the co-founder, director, and producer of Women in Dance, a showcase that brings females in all walks of life together in a festival of empowerment while showcasing a variety of dance styles. She's also the founder of So Dance Studios. So strives to provide a space and community in which young dancers may flourish and grow to love dance and all that it offers. As a mother of two, she truly believes that dance teaches more than just dance and continues to expand her knowledge so that she may share her passion for the love of it. Thank you and welcome for being here, Melissa. And as for all the panelists, you can read their full bios. I'm reading a bit of a shortened versions because I want to create more space for their conversation. So you can read your full bios in the links that you have received. So moving on to Dion. Dion Walcott is a business executive with over 20 years of working in senior roles with educational and cultural institutions and Fortune 500 companies to generate revenue by implementing strategic vision, planning, and partnerships. Some of Dion's notable projects are driving $2 million in revenue to the Out of the Box Rise of the Sneaker Culture exhibition in partnership with the Badashi Museum, spearheading an educational partnership with the National Basketball Association and his Bryce Creation Marketed, which has collectively generated over 20 million revenue with various clients and exposure for over thousands of creatives. So welcome, Dion, and thank you for being here. Next, I'd like to introduce Ashley Mackenzie Barnes. Ashley has been a creative director, design lead, curator, and part-time academic professor with over 15 years of experience in the advertising, media, publishing, retail, editorial, financial, entertainment, and charity and nonprofit sectors. As a creative director and art director, she has conceptualized and led award-winning global campaigns for Scotiabank and executed large-scale projects for Indigo's digital platforms, TEDx Toronto, Bell Media, We Charity, and several small to mid-sized creative agencies. Her design skills were also most recently acquired by Lauryn Hill for her fashion collection celebrating 20 years of the miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Most recently, she was one of the 2019 curators for Nuit Blanche Toronto, and her curatorial work has included programming, exhibitions, creative collaborations, and installations for companies such as Samsung, Harbourfront Centre, Manifesto Festival, and Soho House. Throughout the year, she's a public speaker and has moderated and facilitated workshops and talks across many forums, including OCAD, City of Toronto, Humber College, #Move the Dial, Ontario Arts Council, TDSB, The Power Plant, Ontario Association of Art Galleries, Fresh Books, Artreach, NIA Center for the Arts, U of T, Artscape, and others. Thank you, Ashley, for being here. We're very happy to have you. And last, Angela. Angela, I'm not sure if I'm going to mispronounce your last name, so do correct me if I do. Angela de Montigny. I don't know if I tried, probably got it wrong. Correct.
Montenay.
Montenay, okay. Thank you. Angela is an internationally renowned Indigenous Canadian designer. Her custom-made and ready-to-wear all-leather clothing collections, bold accessories, and statement jewelry collections have been sold in specialty boutiques and galleries throughout North America and Europe since '95. The last 5 years have been busy ones for Angela, which saw her establish Young and Native Fashion Incorporated, the opening of her flagship boutique and gallery on the trendy James Street North in Hamilton, as well as launching her Respect Capsule collection during South Africa Fashion Week in October 2017. She has since launched her most recent capsule collection, Off the Stars, during London Fashion Week in February 2018, which has received rave reviews both in the UK and Canada. She is excited about returning to London in February 2019, which has passed, for your latest collection during the London Fashion Week. Angela has not only been a trailblazer for Aboriginal fashion for 2 decades, she has also produced some of Canada's most important showcases for Indigenous designers, such as Fashion Nation, L'Oreal Fashion Week, Toronto, Fire and Fashion, Planet Indigenous, Toronto, From Culture to Couture, Toronto, and the first ever Aboriginal Fashion Week during the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver, BC. She was the co-founder of the Canadian Aboriginal Design Council, is currently a co-founder of the newly launched Ontario Fashion Exchange, and sat on the board of the Hamilton Arts Council. She's a current member of the Humber Program Advisory Committee and a board member of the newly formed Aboriginal Conservation and Ecology Incorporated, and as of September 2018 has been appointed as the new Distinguished Designer in Residence for FCAD at Ryerson University in Toronto. Welcome and thank you for being here, Angela. So as everybody can see, the panel is amazing and so much experience. So I really encourage you to think about where you are in your own journey, in your creative business, and see how can you get any support, any questions that you have during this time, and really take advantage of the amazing panel that is here and ask them any questions that you have. So I'd like to start off by asking the first question to the panel. And the first question is really if you can tell us a little bit more about your own entrepreneurial journey. What this workshop and courses talk a lot about is that mindset of when we transition from being an artist to being a creative entrepreneur. So I would love to hear your own experience and your own journey when that became that transition for you, when you realized you're more than just a creative professional, but you're also a creative entrepreneur. So if you can share, and whatever who'd like to go first, if you can just kind of share your own experience along this journey, that would be much appreciated. Melissa, would you like to go first? I see. Okay.
I figure maybe we'll just go in the order that you introduced us, and then we don't have to worry about interrupting. Well, hello, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this, not only to share some of my own experiences, but to take this opportunity to hear from the other panelists whose bios are extraordinary, and I'm looking for this to be a learning opportunity for myself as well. So to answer the question, I think that, so for me, dance was something that I had started at a very young age. And I think early on, I knew that it was something that I was very passionate about and needed to be part of my life. And as I got older, I realized that it was something that I also needed to share, which I think art is in general, right? It's sharing something with others and hoping that it brings people together. So I was, in my younger years, really performing quite a bit and having a lot of opportunities to do that. And then realizing that I enjoyed working with youth, and how could I do that aside from just a performance aspect. And that's when I began doing a lot of teaching. And when I began doing a lot of teaching, at one point I was teaching, I think, at 20 different dance studios, literally all over. I was driving sometimes as far as like 2 hours to do guest artist work, and just wanting to reach as many children as possible. And I think that's when I started to make the transition. So going from the performance aspect and knowing that I could reach a whole other audience in a different way. And that's when I really started to work on my teaching and really wanting to build that. I think I realized that I had the opportunity to kind of create my own business after having had the experience of working at so many other dance studios. I quickly realized that I was already my own business. I didn't know for the longest time. You know, I just thought, well, I have all of these contracts all over the city, all over the province, sometimes all over the country. And then it just one day clicked where I was like, well, I am my own business, right? I'm doing everything that I would need to do other than not having my own kind of corporation. So I had the opportunity of working at a well-known dance studio in the city of Toronto. And I'd gone in and I'd worked at that studio for almost 14 years. And I went in as their youth program director. And the program was really small. And within 2 years of being there, you know, I was running that program and it grew. And then I created a pre-professional training program for dancers that were looking for a career in dance. And at that point, after doing that for about 7 years, I realized, okay, it's time for me to just do this on my own, because I'm technically already am. But I think a lot of it took some growth, but confidence in realizing that what was holding me back, a fear of kind of going out on my own and having my own business within the arts, I had already been doing that. And even, you know, there's no different now. I think when you do run a business, mentorship is still very important. And it's not that I'm all out on my own, you know, I still contact colleagues within the industry, and we bounce ideas off each other and we discuss things. So it was no different than when I had been binded to someone else's business, so to speak. So I think really what happens is one day you just kind of, you wake up and you're like, I'm already doing it. So what's really holding me back? Because, you know, we think there's this fear about starting your own business and putting yourself out there. And there's always that, you know, for some, I know for myself, the fear of failure. And I was much older when I opened up my own studio, and I had 2 kids and a mortgage, and, you know, put a lot at risk. But I think I just had to give myself the opportunity to believe that this was something I was already doing. And I just needed to kind of like, you know, cut the ropes a little bit and let myself freely go into something that I'd already been doing for most of my life. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you. Would like to answer that question next. We don't have to go in the order that I announced, so you can just go in whatever order you like. Dion.
I guess I can jump in. I think first I would say for me, like my journey started a little bit different than a lot of people in that first I had to recognize what an artist / a creative really was, because I feel like 10 years ago when I started, I've always looked as an artist as someone who has a specific talent, that could draw, that could paint, that could dance. So I didn't put myself into that category. So I never really seen myself as a creative, but I was always working around creatives and developing programs for creative people. One of the first programs I started was a sneaker mentorship program for the TDSB. 10 years ago, it was called Toronto Loves Kicks. And then in designing that, one of the people that I was working with at the school said to me, you realize that you're an artist in your own right, right? And I was like, how do you figure? Because I can't draw. Just because that's where my mind was, like artists are supposed to have a specific talent. And they're like, because you're the one who can connect the dots to actually make this program come to life. That's a certain type of artistry. That's a talent in itself. So then I started to look at it from that lens, and all of a sudden it opened me up to a whole bunch of different opportunities of not only being a creative, but being someone who supports creative people to get an opportunity or to showcase their talent. After I finished at the TDSB, then I went on to work at the Bata Shoe Museum, which you talked about earlier, to help them put on one of the first ever sneaker exhibitions. And I developed a lot of programming for the exhibition, but part of my role was also partnerships, which I had never done at that time. It was super intimidating, but the same way I approached programming is the way I approach partnerships, just figuring out what creative people needed and how that would be aligned with a partner. When I finished there, I said I went into the Bata Shoe Museum with like a high school degree or high school diploma of creativity, and I came out with like programs and partnership honorary, something crazy, right? So after I left the Bata Shoe Museum, I decided to jump and start to build programs and partnerships on my own through my own company called Marked. But I would say I realized it when, to be totally transparent, when you're doing all these programs and partnerships for institutions and they're making a whole bunch of revenue from it, but it's your idea. And then you start saying to yourself, well, what if I was to just step out on my own and try to create it, not only for the institution, but also put myself a part of the equation. So making the jump from the Bata Shoe Museum to starting to service a whole bunch of different clients is when it happened for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, so it seemed like a bit of that same idea of like really stepping away from doing it for others and then stepping into doing it for yourself.
Yeah, and also just like taking the jump, because I think we've been conditioned to think it needs to happen between certain lines, and we're not supposed to be able to jump out of the lines and break the continuum. I think now more people are starting to see themselves as like, I'm a service, just me, myself, to whoever I work for. Whether I choose to be an employee, that's your decision. But I could also choose to be a business that services a place of employment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Angela or Ashley?
Yeah, I think I have a similar approach to what Dion was saying, but also to Melissa too. So I did start off as a visual artist. Like I went to school for visual arts, and like I went to academy when I was younger, and then I moved into art direction. So I moved into graphic design and art direction in college. Still kept my art background, and at the time, maybe in my earlier 20s, I was just getting into my own showcasing, to having my own solo art shows. I did my first one, I think, at 21, and it kind of sprung me into my curatorial practice without really knowing. But the real transition happened for me, I think, when I inherited the job of being a visual arts director for Manifesto Festival, which was, I think now it was probably 10 years ago. And it's very similar to what Dion was saying, but something did shift for me from being the artist and having to storytell for myself, and you know, really considering myself just as the artist, and having to go into being a curator and having to think for others, and how I'm positioning artwork and how I'm storytelling from them, and considering sales and considering layouts, and you know, putting on a more of a business hat, I think happened with that transition. But I was still practicing my own art, and I had a couple of shows after that I had done for myself. But I would say in the last 10 years, it's been a phase approach for me, even to now, where COVID is the beginning of me starting my own creative agency, like actually branded and with a title, and I went incorporated last year, and this year I'm actually creating a different umbrella for my agency, and not so straight and narrow where any of it was planned. I always say that my story is very unplanned. It's intuitive, and I think that I've come through this process through trial and error. I've had a few mentors along the way, but you kind of fall into these roles as your practice calls you to. And again, like Melissa said, you know, when I started getting into teaching, I got into teaching at Humber a few years ago. That was also another call into my role, which then took away from me being the artist and having to think of self and positioning self and having to guide others. And I was teaching professional practice. So, I mean, it doesn't get any more professional and grounding than teaching, you know, 20-year-olds and college students who are trying to find their way and have no idea what they're trying to do for visual and digital arts, and having next to no business sense, trying to teach them how to understand the professional side of their practice. So I think all in all, it's been an accumulation of experience. And as I've gone through being the artist, to the curator, to like a mentor at the Remix Project, to being a teacher, to even my own practice, being an intern, a junior designer, an art director, and a creative director, and then eventually a director of creative operations for an agency a few years ago. It's all been phased for me. And I think as we fast forward to 2020, COVID has excelled me to really position my business differently. And a lot of this is I would say the last 3 years I went completely independent, but then I would land myself in a position, like recently I was in a creative director position for Indigo. And then after that position ended, I kind of said all of this is going to have to be independent contract work. And then it would funnel through my agency. So I came by it naturally, and that's where I am now. And I think that as you start to grow and shift your craft and your business, and you get into these stronger roles of education and leadership and director, you naturally have to inherit the business side of it even more. And so that's where I am in my practice. And I am just at the beginning stages of maybe like 12 years later of doing well, really, I've been doing this work for over 15 years, but 12 years later of even being a curator, and 4 years later of being a teacher, that I'm situated as a small agency.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And I think what you echo is one thing that I talk a lot about in the workshops, this idea of not being attached to our titles, of, you know, not saying, well, I'm a visual artist, I'm a painter, and that's it, that's all I'm staying for the rest of my life, kind of thing. And it's this idea to be able to open to what is the essence underneath all of it, like why you do what you do, and all these other ways are just tools that you can use as a way of expressing that, what it is that you're about and what you want to kind of put out. I think you're really echoing that from all the different titles that you have had over the years. I think it really shows that diversity and how important it is in every business. Yeah, thank you. Angela.
Hi, everyone. Wow, I'm in really amazing company. Thanks so much for asking me to be a part of this. You guys will have to excuse, we've got, I'm doing this in my dining room. So I started out from the very beginning being an entrepreneur. So with fashion, you have a product basically that you're designing to sell, and so it's, you know, it's always been that for me. But you know, the whole diversity thing is really important, because, you know, if you do put yourself in a box of I'm only a fashion designer, well, then that's very limiting. So I've always done, you know, multiple different things, you know, whether it's producing fashion shows, because, you know, I would like to be able to present or provide opportunities for not only myself, but other designers. So being able to do that, designing anything that's creative, whether it's jewelry or furniture or just art for the sake of art. You know, I think a creative industry is really a very broad spectrum, and which is really exciting, because that means you can, if you're creative, you can create anything. And I think that's something that hasn't really been discussed before. So, and that's one of the things that excites me about what I do, because the possibilities are really endless. So, you know, I started out in fashion, and that's kind of worked its way into other things. And now I'm doing, you know, huge public art installations, fine jewelry. I'm now doing a lot more mentoring, because I have, you know, 30 years of experience in every aspect of running a business and selling a product. And so whether it's wholesale or retail or catalog or online or all of that, you know, it's and as an entrepreneur, you always have to change and go with the flow. Markets change, people change, environments change. So you have to be flexible enough. And I think if you're a creative person and you're not in a box, then that enables you to do that. So I feel very lucky that I'm in that kind of an industry where I'm not stuck in one place all the time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And my question to all of you is kind of reflecting back on your own journey. What would be something that you would say to somebody who is in that moment of transition right now, who are starting to maybe realize, oh, wait, I am a business, or wait, like I can be more than just this one thing, or I want to take this and make this, you know, independent, or I want to make this what I live off of. Like, what would be something that from your own journey that you could provide as a piece of advice or suggestion or thought, reflection?
I would love to jump in here on that one. I feel like I'm learning it myself right now. There's a few things. I think understanding your strengths and weaknesses in business is really important, because some of us still are truly creatives, right? Like when I think about, I can't really do this on my own. So I do have a business partner that I'm working with right now who is more the strategy, the business lead, and I am still much more the creative, like they considered me the chief creative officer of this. And I think that we have to still keep those things in mind, that we do have, some of us may have weaknesses in business, whether it's financing or doing the admin work, where you just do need that other person who has that strength. Because if not, it can hinder what you're doing, right? It can actually work in the opposite direction. So when we get into thinking about looking at ourselves as businesses, I think a delegation is important. The team that you want to work with, even I have trusted resources, designers, videographers, layout artists. Like, building that network around you is everything to the strengthening the success of your business. So you have to, I'd say, take time with transitioning from being that solo artist or that solo creative, and what that means to expand. Because with expansion, like, obviously there's great opportunity for it to be lucrative. It's great opportunity to learn new skill sets or get out into the market more in different ways that you weren't there before. But you can't necessarily do that in the same way that you were when you were just a creative. And I see that with my own business now, that I have so many projects on the go, and it's amazing to see so many different contracts and opportunities and all this work. But if I didn't have my network to help bring those opportunities to life, I would just be doing myself a disservice by transitioning into becoming like a smaller agency, or even acquiring a space without those partnerships.
Yeah.
I think I'll piggyback on that, because I think she touched on a lot of stuff I was going to say as well. First, I mean, from the jump, if you're going to make the jump, I would say make the decision, because I feel like one of the hardest things is like you're halfway in, halfway out. And when you're halfway in, halfway out, I'm an energy person. It's hard for the energy to get to where you want to go, because you're giving it two different directions. So, like, first off, just make the decision. And then if you're going to jump out, I think I've worked with a lot of creatives who are very good at one thing. Like, I'm a painter or I'm a dancer. It's like, if you jump out, you have to have the shift of thinking from less of a service, more of like, how do you scale? So how can I have a diverse offering to the market that I'm going to go into? And that's more of just like a protective layer, because we all just lived through COVID. I've known a lot of people who can do one thing well, but then when unforeseen circumstances happen, all of a sudden your business is done. So when you're thinking from like, how else can I offer the marketplace several things with the talent that I have? It makes you somewhat bulletproof, not all the time, but if you're thinking that way, like, okay, if I'm a really good graphic designer, that's one thing, but can I also come up with a t-shirt line so I can have additional revenue come in? Just thinking of it from like diversifying what you're going to offer, because when you first jump, you're really, really passionate about usually one thing that you're great at. So like, what's the second and the third and the fourth thing that you also are good at that you potentially could make some funds from?
That's such an
I think what both Ashley and Dion are saying is really, really important. When I decided that I was going to open up my own dance studio, I literally was like, okay, well, I'm going into it with not, and I think what some people think is like, okay, well, how am I going to afford to pay people this? Like, that's the reality of it. For most of us, when we're starting sometimes with little. And when I started, I did everything. I was like, well, I'm just going to do everything. I'm going to teach every class. I'm going to do the web design. I'm going to teach myself how to do that, and I'm going to design our website, and then I'm going to do all the finances, and I'm going to do all the administrative stuff, and I'm going to produce all of the shows, and I'm going to be the director of this, and I'm the artistic director, and I'm this. And very quickly, I realized, first of all, I'm not good at all this. And there were some days that I'd get up and I'd turn on my computer and I'd sit down at my desk and I'd be like, I just want to dance. Can I just get up and dance today? And the reality is that your art, whatever it is not the only part of it. Running a business takes a lot, and you do need that support, and you do need people that you can trust, and you do need people that specialize in the different aspects of whatever it takes to run your business to be able to take on those roles. And once they take on those roles, you need to trust yourself in the decision you made to let them take on those roles, right? So like Ashley was saying, you need to be able to delegate, but once you've delegated, you need to be okay with that decision you've made to delegate and trust the people that you've brought into your business to help that business grow. Because again, the reality is you can have your business for a very long time, but if you're looking for significant growth, you need a team. You will either, one, burn out very quickly, two, start to not like what you've loved and been so passionate about for so much of your life, and then quickly realize that all of these other things, like, you may be getting them up and running, but they could be done so much better because there are people out there that specialize on those different aspects. So yeah, when you start out, you may find that you have to do quite a bit just to get things up and running, but I think it's really important to have a plan in and think about what it's going to take to run your business successfully, and what you're going to do next, or who you can bring in next to help you do it, because unfortunately it can't be a one-man show.
Can I just say something really quickly on something you said? And I think it's important because, like, just the pure nature of being an entrepreneur, you're going to learn to try to do everything on your own. Just when you first start out, that's how it is. And I always tell creatives, learning to give it away or learning to let go is actually a skill. It's like a skill that you have to actually craft and work on, the same way you have to, like, learn to work Photoshop. So, like, it's not going to happen yesterday. Like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to let go of this responsibility tomorrow and feel good about it. That's not the truth. It's actually a skill that you have to work on, and it's going to happen over time, and then you'll get to the place where you feel a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Everything all of you said, you know, they're all really great, important points. You know, especially when it comes to having diverse offerings. I have always, you know, if one thing doesn't work or doesn't sell, because like I said, markets change, everything changes so fast now in business, that, you know, you've got something else, an alternative that, you know, it's like test marketing on a regular basis. So I always had, you know, different mini collections, whether it was handbags or it was jewelry or accessories or soy candles. And so when, you know, or diverse product points. So someone may not be able to afford a $1,000 leather jacket, but they can afford a $30 candle. So it's knowing your market and providing things that people need and want. And then, yeah, the whole thing, you have to have a team, and it's a tricky thing to do. You know, I kind of I don't sidestep it, but I do a lot of collaborations because I'm cultural business. It's a little more difficult. So what I do is I collaborate with other artists. And so, you know, what that does is you are expanding your market, you're expanding your product line without having to do it all yourself, and you're helping promote another artist at the same time. It's actually one of my most favorite things to do. And then you're building an industry. So it's, and then about letting go and trusting people with your business. That's a really tough thing to do because not everybody is going to do a good job. So you have to research. It's very much trial and error. I've been doing this for, you know, over 25 years. So you just have to do your due diligence, and you have to know a little bit about everything, especially when you're first starting out, but make sure that you know who you're working with before you give away, you know, really important aspects of your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, Ashley.
I was going to say one more thing. This something a little different than I think what all of us have said, but also I think might be relevant for like designers or creatives or people who are you know, not just artists, but don't move to it took me almost 15 years, right? Like I didn't move too quickly into being a small agency or being a full-time entrepreneur, because the reason was that I found I learned so much from being in corporate environments. I learned so much from being in a creative director role and then being in a director of operations role. where I think naturally what Dion was saying is that it's a skill set. It's something in your brain that you need to exercise to be able to understand delegation, trust, having how to run a team, how to really employ the right people to get your vision done. And I don't know if I could have learned those skills if I wasn't forced in it in a position. Like even understanding project management and managing project management, employee management, managing other creatives, designers, juniors, interns, resourcing, employing, creating budgets, invoicing. These are hard skills that I personally learned from working in my field. And I think sometimes we get really, as creatives, we get really quick to be like, let's do it. I'm gonna do it on my own. I'm gonna create my own business, which is great. Some of us naturally have that skill set, and some of us are natural entrepreneurs. I was an entrepreneur at heart, but I didn't have the natural sense of business that I was ready to get into quickly. Where people were like, why don't you just start your own agency, actually? Hey, look at all the work you're doing. Yeah, I mean, it sounds easy, but I really encompass a lot of the experience that I learned through these roles. So naturally, when I went into being an independent contractor, I didn't have to force myself to exercise those muscles. It came to me very authentically and organically. So it's just, I think it's just another way of looking at like that advice is also, I don't think we need to rush it. Some of us don't need to rush it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what I like about what you and Angela kind of talking about is the greater industry that you're actually part of, and not forgetting that in your business, it's not just your business, but there's this whole industry from which you can learn. You can find support as well. So I think, thank you both for mentioning that in different ways, whether that's through having roles that may seem they're not quote unquote part of your business, but they're informing your business, or whether it's through collaboration with people in industry. I think that's really important. Melissa, did you want to add something?
No, I was just going to say I completely agree. I mean, I was a youth program director and a pre-professional training program artistic director, which was a program actually created for a business that wasn't mine for almost 9 years before. And what I learned there, you know, there's no way. And I mean, you know, I just turned 41. My studio is still fairly new. It took me many years. And like Ashley, you know, in my 20s, people are like, why haven't you opened up your own dance studio yet? You're so good with kids and you're so great at what you do. And that's all great. But like, I agree, you do have to, you definitely, and however long that takes, and you know, it's different for everybody, but you know, what I learned in the roles that I had, you know, I wouldn't have been able to pursue the business on my own without that background and learning from other people that had already been doing it for some time. So yeah, I definitely say, you know, I agree, however long it takes you, and like Ashley was saying, that's different for everyone, but and that goes back to like mentorship too, right? Which I think will come up in the next question a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's important because sometimes when we hear the word team, we think like, oh gosh, I have to pay for an accountant, I have to pay for this person, I have to pay for that person. You're like, I don't even have any money to start this business. How am I supposed to pay for everyone? But that idea of like, it's actually could be through mentorships and these relationships that you build. I think that's really important. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that as well. So going on to the next question, which some of you have kind of already touched some of those things in there, but we can expand on them, is maybe you can talk about a challenge that for you, or, you know, you've had, or you still have, or you're still learning through your own entrepreneurial journey, and what have been some things that have really kind of helped you get through, or maybe common challenges that you've seen as you've gone along the path and been in the creative sector. Angela.
I think I can answer that because we're still going through that. So my main expertise is in retail sales, and you know, for a good majority of the last 15 years, I've been working on a custom design basis, one-on-one with my clients. So as soon as COVID happened and the lockdown and non-essential businesses, which is always creatives, pretty much, had to close. And unfortunately, my boutique that I spent, you know, 6 long years of building and creating, and had to close. So that meant, okay, I have to move online if I'm going to stay in business. And what can I produce still? And what is, and this is the really important thing that I found, is what do people need right now? And so what I wanted to do, so I made a complete shift. I moved away from fashion because it just was impossible to do at the time, still is. And I had a hand-poured soy candle line, which has just, I've completely, pivot is like the overused word this year, but it is exactly what I had to do, and move everything online and focus everything on social media and create products that help people from a, mental anxiety, calmness, things that, people really feel they need at this, during this time. And so that's what I've done. And so being able to already have a product line that was already tested and people loved and had a following, I just focused on that and just changed direction. So, and it's a learning curve because, even the social media and online sales, it changes every day, every week, and you have to really be on top of it. But it's knowing that you can do that and tapping into what you think, products that people need right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Would like to
I think for my business, one of the challenges, and this probably happens for a lot of businesses, at some point, something really exciting is going to happen. And that exciting thing is you're going to see growth, whatever the growth means for your business. And it's great. But with that growth comes more expense. And that for me, for my business specifically, has been one of the challenges. Is more so recently, we've established the business, we're known in our community, and we're growing. With that growth, we need more instructors, again, because I can't do it all, right? We need more equipment, we need more supplies, we need more software, we need the space more, we need more insurance, like the list can go on. And it's scary and exciting all at the same time. So to answer the second part of the question, which is like, how do you kind of get through that challenge? Well, it's for me right now, it's still ongoing because we saw significant growth. We saw an increase in our expenses, and then COVID hit. So then we were closed. And that's been challenging. But what it's meant is my team and we've had to get creative. How do we keep going? How do we offer, where can we cut costs? Where can we offer more programming? What can we do differently? It's really looking at the whole picture again and taking some time. I would love to say that, we've got it figured out, it's all good. No, this is still a process for us right now. Because again, COVID has put a little bit of a stop to things for us, but it's important to not let that completely discourage you either, because it is part of it. I remember sitting down with my accountant when I incorporated the business, and she said, don't expect to see, she's like, most new businesses don't see anything for the first 5 years. She's like, you're lucky if you'll break even. She's like, I'm just telling you that now. And I was like, what do you mean? But that's the reality of it. So know that that's a possibility. But I think that if you can work through those struggles, you'll be okay, and it is difficult right now, seeing a lot of businesses not being able to maintain due to the current, the pandemic. But again, it's really important to go back to the drawing board. Like, go back to that. If you had a vision board or you had a business plan, that very first one that you sketched in your notebook or on your computer, wherever you did it, go back, look at that again. Okay, this is what I did. This is what worked. What didn't work? What can I do now? Okay, it's really time right now to get super creative. And how can I still make sure that I'm engaging my clientele? They still need to see me. My studio's closed, but they need to know I'm still here, that I haven't gone anywhere. So how can I do that? And social media for us personally has been really great with that. We're experts in Zoom now. Who would have thought? But for us, that's what was our biggest challenge, because it's bittersweet, because the growth is there and that's so exciting. But with growth sometimes means you're now having to put out more financially and just juggling those books. So that's when someone in finance, that's when you want to bring that team person in, because that's where they're going to help you. So, yeah.
Yeah. What I hear a bit from both of you is this sense of kind of almost planning for these things ahead of time, like, you know, preparing for that growth. But even Angela, as you talked about, you already tested out the line beforehand. So it was a lot easier to pivot towards it now, rather than now try and create it from the beginning and wonder, is it even going to work at all? So kind of starting that process even way before something happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ashley or Dion?
Yeah, there was 2 points that like echoing a lot of what Melissa said, that there was really 2 strong points that came out for this for me. So in expansion, again, very similar. When you expand, I think there's 2 things you have to be very careful about that I'm noticing with my business is what's good for your business and what's good for you personally while you expand. And I think one of these things that we get into, and you hear it all the time, 1, on a personal level, is burnout. And then 2, not getting tunnel vision with your business. So I kind of I was trying to jot down my notes really quickly, but on the burnout level, I recently, as we went into COVID, it was essential for me to create an office space that was like just decluttered and specifically for how I was going to work. Because like the more you expand and the more opportunities come in, you notice you're living on your phone. Then I installed Zoom on my phone, and then now I have everything, like my emails are on my phone, and then you never get a mental break from it. And then you're taking it into the bedroom, you're taking it into the living room. And I just think that is not good practice because it actually burns you out and it stresses you out more. So I started creating delegations, right? Like I have 2 laptops now, and one's like the personal laptop, one's the business laptop. Eventually I might have to get a second cell phone. I'm not there yet, but if I keep having everything entering my mental system all day long through Zoom, and I'm checking these, I'm doing calls on Zoom on my phone now, I can't detach. That's something I'm gonna have to like consider. And I actually just work in my office space now. Like there's a delegated space, especially in COVID, where I have to be able to be focused, be in there, and then disconnect when I'm not. And I think that's a big part of personal practice and burnout while you're getting into expansion. Also, like you hear it all the time, and I know it seems so like, oh yeah, so fluff, like self-care practices. If I wasn't exercising, if exercising is not your thing, meditation, if that's not your thing, walking, reading, whatever your thing is, it is so imperative. And I know it sounds like a self-help book, but I started taking like a 45-minute break and doing like F45 in the middle of the day as an exercise. And I was just coming back completely rejuvenated and like so much more sharp. Just having that 45-minute break in the middle of my day made me actually go on longer. And I'm at the point where I have 10-hour days. And I think that's something that we have to understand, that if you are moving into that process of being like an entrepreneur or being a business, you don't work less hours, you work more. And you don't have the choice, you're gonna have to. Like I organically now I'm just working 10, 12, 15-hour days. That's just what it is. But the other thing I really want to warn about that I noticed is I think when we start getting tunnel vision too, and then you have a chance to miss opportunities. And I think for me, it was really important that I stayed connected to my network and how I networked. And I stayed accessible through emails, because it's something like this, working culture. sent me an email, and then AGO sends me an email, and then I get an email from Toronto Arts Foundation. And if we're not paying attention to those things that also help expand and grow the business and help network what we're doing, because we get so tunnel vision in the work, I think we also are missing the mark with what we're trying to do in expansion. So I think staying accessible and staying on top of those opportunities is still something you have to, like, you always hear that someone becomes inaccessible when they get too big or too large, and you know, their emails go missed. And sometimes in that email, there's a really golden opportunity waiting for you. So I think we have to also pay attention to the networking part of our business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing it up, and thank you for bringing up the self-care is such an important piece.
I guess I'll take a little bit of a different direction in that a lot of my work with creatives has to do with programming and partnerships. I feel like a lot of creatives, we get focused on the task. So for example, if you have to work on a mural, that's what you're working on. And I feel like the creative sector, or creatives in general, we're always the first ones to go when the budget gets cut. So that's always a tricky part. So I think one of the challenges is like, how do you present value to what you're bringing forward, and learning how to showcase that, not just by your work, but like by you and your team being involved in that. How I've overcome that challenge, been a painful one over the last few years, but I work with this formula. I call it early, activate, and extension. And I give my guys, or I shouldn't say my guys and my girls that I work with, we have, if we're pitching a project or we're going to execute a project, it has to fit into that formula. Early meaning like, what can we present early in the process that equals value? What can we present to activate it that's value? And then the extension, once it's done, how is that also presenting value? So if it doesn't fit in those three buckets, I don't move forward with it, or we don't leave the room until we can present all three of those. Because I feel as creatives, we're usually focused on the activation part, which is like, we have to activate because this is what's gonna, pay the bills. But if you're looking at it from securing funding or securing your place, if you're working from those three sections, which early, activate, and extension, it's hard to justify getting rid of all of that value, versus very easy to say, you know what, we don't need that painting anymore, or we don't need this part of it anymore. But when you can figure out how to present the value wholeheartedly, it just makes for a better position for whatever your business is trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's a question for you, Dion, in there, and maybe it's sort of a reflective question, but you can answer it if you want, is why do so many jump to cut creative innovators when navigating tough times? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like similar to when I very first started, like I didn't really even know what creatives really was, right? So I would probably be that same person, be like, we need more mentoring versus we need a piece of art to put on the wall. But to my point, it's like, if you can show me why we need that out on the wall versus a mentorship program, or both, all of a sudden it changes the conversation. I think one of the main reasons is just, even if you look at from an elementary level, we're not taught to value creativity. We're taught to value, math and the course things that, we go to school to learn. So I could go on and on, but I don't want to go too deep into it. But I feel like as creatives, the more we can present value, it starts to shift the conversation. And look at yourself as not that it's our job, but we have to also educate institutions and people that we're going to try to do work with on why it's important to make sure that like the creative and the arts sector is supported in everything that we do.
Yeah, and I think that with each artist or creative that provides value to someone in some way, that is one step towards the sector itself showing value overall. I think just everyone, if I as a creative can show the value that my creative work is bringing, then I'm uplifting the sector with me. And then if all of us do that, then the sector can show that why there's value and why the creatives shouldn't be the ones that should be cut first. Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, if you look at COVID, like the truth is without creatives and art, a lot of people wouldn't even know what to do. Like, yeah, it's not about your actual, like your dance skill, but creatives have a different way of looking at things that I've known personally have saved a lot of businesses. So, I mean, you know, they're troubleshooters by nature, right? But we're not trained to look at it that way.
Absolutely. And Angela, you added in here as well, creating added value to the art by creating programming around it. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, you can look at art and it has, you know, you have the ability to create things around it. So like when we did our proposal for the Hamilton Waterfront Public Art Project, it was cultural in nature. It had meaning around it. And it was, so what I did was create other levels that was attached to it. So we're creating an education program so that people can learn about what the designs are in the panels, and it has, you know, native language incorporated into it, and that's a whole big piece that's just part of that. But then having products that you can design from components of that you can sell in order to and create a whole social enterprise around that as well. Like there's really, if you think about it, there's so many layers that you could create from one thing, from a piece of art that could benefit the community. That's why I'm saying look at it in a multi-layer kind of capacity.
Yeah, and what I like from what you're saying too is that it's not just multi-layer, but it's multi-sectoral. So it's looking at other sectors and seeing how do we work together with sectors that we typically maybe wouldn't think to work with because we're only working within the creative sector, to then benefit the work that we're doing, but benefit the impact and the value that we're providing as well. Most of you answered my last question around COVID and where you're at right now in this question. So I want to open it up to people who are in the audience to see if you have any particular questions. If not, I do have some questions that I can throw at you from this last few workshops where some people have asked me some things that I think would be great to ask you. But I want to open it up first to anybody in the audience if you have a question or if there's something you want to add. Okay, so we have a question from Anne about pricing strategies. So just curious about some of your pricing strategies. So maybe you can just talk a little bit more about pricing in general. It's always a big sticking point for artists when they're transitioning to being an entrepreneur or a business. So maybe you can just kind of, maybe I'll start with Angela and then we can start with other ones.
Okay, so pricing is a very tricky thing in that, you know, you have to sort of already know or decide where in the market that you want to be. So for an example, I decided that I wanted to be in the high-end arena as far as fashion goes, because just because of the nature of what I do, the materials that and how I wanted to present my business. And so you know, it's all about cost of materials, and you know, you also have to learn the hardest thing as an artist and a creative is how to attach a dollar value to your time is always the most difficult thing to do. So what am I worth? What are people willing to pay for? And sometimes it's perceived value. And if you are perceived as something, if it's expensive, usually people perceive it, well, it must be really great then if it's that much money. If you lowball everything because you're trying, and in Canada, really, when you're making a product, just because of the nature of our labor and standards of living, everything is much more expensive to make here than in other parts of the world. So we can't really compete in price. And if you're competing in price, then, you know, unless you're making things offshore and you just want to do huge volume and that's what you want to do, then that's a whole different ballgame. But if you're doing something as a creative and that is very artistic and unique and whatever, you know, you have to look at the value of that as being unique and different and what are people willing to pay for it. And that puts you in a particular market sector.
Yeah, thank you. Ashley.
Yeah, I can say I think resources are a really good source, like legal resources. We have Carfax too. So there's different, there's the agency side of things. So there's actual rates that are out there for a lot of creatives who are unsure of what to do. And I think that sometimes that's overlooked and we kind of just are like, let's throw out a number. Like there's stipulations for how much you should be charging per inch or square footage when you're doing work. You can find these things under Carfax. Canadian Artist Representation. There's stipulations for what you should be getting paid when you're showing in a gallery. You shouldn't be paying, you should be getting paid, what you should be getting paid for like a panel, all of these things, right? And then if you're on the other side of, like if you're a designer or a creative director or a producer, there's also like you could go on, but like any, like the recruitment sites or the hiring sites, like let's say Vitamin T or Creative Circle, right? They all put out books free, like this free books, or I guess you could call them documents, that will list what the rate is for almost anybody in the creative sector, other than like maybe a visual artist, that you can see what the going rate is, hourly, salary. And a lot of people tend to hire based on those documents, because these are like actual legal documents that are industry standards. So before I would go out and say how I'm pricing, I would say check into resources if you can, to look at where you land. And for me personally, what I do is I do hourly rates. So I know as like, if I have a creative director and I have a junior designer, or I have a producer, I know what those hourly rates are, and that's how I budget. So whether it's $100 an hour, $50 an hour, or it's $350, I'm going by an industry standard, and I usually charge industry standard by hours. Some senses you just have a budget and you have to work within it. And if it's a project that I love, like let's say Nuit Blanche, right? Like I can't charge Nuit Blanche per hour, but there was a lump sum of money that was given to do that project. And what I had to negotiate with them was what that broke down into hours for me. Where some creatives were like, I'll just get a grant and, you know, I'll just do it. And I'll quit my job for a year. And that was not feasible for me. So I had to really structure out how much time I could put weekly towards doing Nuit Blanche for a year for the lump sum of money that they were giving me. And that equaled one meeting a week with the City of Toronto, and maybe 5 hours a week working on like artists' conceptions and stuff like that. So I'm a little bit more rigorous, I think, with how I map out my hours and rates. But it's kind of been a formula that's been able to have me justify when I'm sending over an SOW or a budget, where I'm landing and why. And I think when you do that for clients and you spell it out, and there's line items and there's like titles and there's rates, or there's an SOW with a plan that's really showing them what the value is and what they're getting, it's a lot harder to argue than being like, well, I think I'll just charge you $1,500 because, you know, that seems right. So that's my best advice to you.
For those who may not know what an SOW is, can you just let them know what it is?
Well, it's a statement of work, right?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on mute. Yeah, statement of work. And for those who don't know what a statement of work is, it usually includes your quote, it includes what your deliverables are, so what you're giving. It could include hours, it includes resources, so you're giving them a quote, but broken down in ways that the client can digest and would also sign off on. So it serves as like a first draft of a contract.
Yeah.
To piggyback on what Ashley said, I think everyone said kind of the same thing. Be rigorous, do the research, but also like be honest with yourself, right? Like if you notice everyone on this panel, like collectively, there's over 50 years of experience, right? So like you may look at Ashley right now, and you're going to try to quote what she's quoting, not realizing she has 15 years of experience, because she's on social and she's popular. Sometimes you guys not you guys personally, but people look into it like, how come she can get paid this and I can't get paid that?
Call me popular?
Yeah, you're not popular? You don't think you're popular? I think you're popular.
I'm going to go look for you right after this on Instagram and Facebook. So I would say yes.
And make sure you leave a comment and say you're popular.
I will.
She hates that I said that. But All jokes aside, like, I mean, the truth is, like, a lot of times we look at what someone else is doing and want to base our quote or our rate based on, you know, well, I've seen Dion get paid this, or I assume he got paid that. Don't start there. Start with what you think your time is worth. Evaluate where you are at with your business and your career, and then come up with a number from there. Because what Dion or anyone on this panel gets paid, that's equal to what our experiences are. So not and your experiences, whoever's listening, may be more than ours, right? And you're shooting yourself below the line, or it may be less. So I think when it comes to pricing, before you even get to numbers, evaluate what's important to you. Like, how do you see yourself valuable versus what the market has? Because you may be doing something as a part, like you might work at BMO, and I paint part-time, so I don't really need a crazy budget because I'm doing it not as aggressive as other people. And I'll be okay with a little budget because I don't have that much experience, even though I'm pretty good at what I'm doing. So just start by being honest with yourself, and then walk into like the pricing and figuring it out. Mm-hmm. And Ashley, you are popular. I'm sorry, man.
Really great point. Thank you, Dion. Melissa, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, knowing your worth is really, really important. And something else that Ashley said that in art, like my industry, is really important is staying within industry standards as well, right? So for dance, we have a very similar, it's CADA, it's Canadian Alliance of Dance. And you hop onto that website and there's, you know, they guide you through rates are for choreography, production, instruction, travel time, you know, all, and it is important to stay within, I think, the industry standards while really knowing, you know, your worth. Especially, I mean, for myself, at running a business, I have instructors on contract. And some of them have a ton of certifications and a ton of experience, and some are just kind of starting out, you know, and they're not all going to get paid the same. They're going to get paid based on their qualifications, their years of experience, their training, their certifications, that kind of thing. So all of that is, I agree, like, you know, really important to take into consideration. And yeah, don't lowball yourself ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we had another question that came through, was let me find it. Sorry. How important has having a consistent brand amongst your various products and offerings been? Has that consistency helped? So who'd ever like to take that on first?
I'll take it, but I feel like there's so many people who can talk. See, Dion was about to do it, and Dion has a solid brand. So do you want to go first, Dion?
Oh, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Sure?
Yeah, for sure.
Consistency for me means accessibility, and it also means being easily recognized. And I'm just gonna flag that we live in a time where everything comes so quickly, and a lot of things live on social, and a lot of things are digital, and like our attention spans are not high. So when you're building a brand, like even the smallest thing, like having a handle that matches the same across all of your social platforms, so when one place is posting it, you're easy to find on others to build your following, to just having like a staple word mark, or like if you're doing sponsorship, or if you're having like a signature on something, that people recognize this, because people build on recognition, and they build I guess on, like, they have to be able to trust that you're a solid source. Right. And I think having the name out there and it being repetitive, like back down to, I'm going to just say this popular thing, right? The one thing I noticed throughout the last 10, 15 years is that if I met somebody or the name popped up, I didn't go under an alias. My name's Ashley Mackenzie Barnes. It's Ashley Mackenzie Barnes on my website. It's Ashley Mackenzie Barnes. Like, that has become the branding, right? That, you know, you see it on Now, or you see it on TV, or it's in my work, or it's never changed, right? There was no alias for me. And it was important for me to do that because that is where that consistency came. So when an agency is pinging me, or I'm showing up on an SEO, or my work is just being attached to my name, that's where that consistency, where I guess where that was my problem with popular. It's this like, is it popularity or is it just the fact that people have heard the name consistently for so long? It's now been attached to my work. It's a platform. And I'm not taking away from what you said, Diana. I hear you. I totally hear you. But that has been my branding platform. And I think that you have to be very consistent so people know who you are and people can start identifying, you know, oh, that was New Week launch. Oh, that was also TEDx. Oh, that was also Harborfront. Oh, she does this block for black thing. Like that consistency is why I think people come back and hire me, why media can find me, why people come back for the services, why I become a reputable name for the services that I'm giving. So it is extremely important. And the more that you can have it branded and recognized and plastered all over the place and can create that consistency that's strong and shows that you have strong visions and values that can stay consistent, the stronger your brand will be.
Mm-hmm. What I really like, is it popularity or is it consistency? It makes me think of something that I heard very similar that said, what makes an expert is just consistency rather than, you know, oh, I'm an expert now because I did this or did that. It's just, I've been consistent at it. And you see me consistently doing it. Yeah. Yeah,
and I think, you know, just to make sure I'm being clear, I'm not saying you're popular from the sense of like, that's why you're good at what you do.
Oh, I know.
No. Just because I know how words can play, right? People will be like, oh, Dion only thinks you're popular. That's why you're here. I don't believe that at all. I think you're actually very good at what you do. And that's why you continue to show up. Popular in the sense of everyone gets to see Ashley, like you're doing great work, not just popular, but she's here for a year. Like I think you're going to be here for a long time. Yeah. From the consistency side, I think the point that you made about your name is super important. I made that mistake when I was very young. My first job was, my first company was Toronto Loves Kicks. And 20 years later, people still see me as a sneaker guy. So like, as well as I'm like, oh, you know, Dion, you're pretty good, you're consistent, but they always attach sneakers to what I do, not understanding that like I've evolved way past sneakers now. So I guess it's a little bit of a gift and a curse, but at the same time, it's like, think for a while about, you know, not only what are you consistent with now, but what you're going to grow into. And the more you can just be consistent how you show up to do the work, what the industry or whatever industry you're in, it will start to open up other lanes because of your consistency and popularity. Mm-hmm. I always say, you know, if you can be popular or consistent in several different lanes is when you're actually really, really good.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, being consistent is super important, just not only as in our work, but just in your life, period, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, to answer whoever asked that question, yeah, consistency, work on it if you can, and know that it's going to change over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like the setting up for growth. Like, think about it. Yeah, definitely. Anybody, and Melissa or Angela, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can say that that's absolutely true. And, you know, no matter, it's about the brand, and yeah, it has to be consistent, and it doesn't matter whatever it is that you do. You know, once you've developed that brand recognition, then people will accept, you know, different things that you're doing, and different projects are going in completely different directions. So that's, you know, and they know what to expect from you. You've built that. So you have to continually always, I say this, you know, especially to young people, do your best work always, you know, and that will just carry you through your life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Master the craft. Melissa, did you want to add something?
Yeah, sorry. So I think all three have already, like, I think we're all adamant consistency is really, really important. Building your brand, making sure that it matches what you're offering, who you are, the work that you've done, the years of experience that you have. So when people see it, like Ashley was saying, in multiple different platforms, they recognize it right away. There's no question. It's like, oh, that's that from there. I mean, my name's Melissa So. My studio is So Dance Studios. you know, we've been using the hashtag for the love of it. For the love of it is something that I started saying when I was 21. So people that know me as Melissa Nascimento, which was prior to me getting married, and then knew me as Melissa So and see So Dance Studios, they know that that's me. And the other thing is with that consistency is also staying consistent in your relationships with the people that you work with. So being who you are. You can't be one person one day and then the next day someone completely different. So I think relationships, how you present yourself, is really important, and the consistency, not just in your brand, but in your personality as well.
Yeah, absolutely. As I always say, in the creative sector, we are really in the business of ourselves, putting ourselves out there. So that's such a great point to end on. So thank you so much. Thank you, Melissa, Ashley, Dion, Angela. We really appreciate your time on Saturday and your sharing your experience, your knowledge. If anybody wants to continue to follow them and get in touch with them, all that information was sent when you registered. You can follow them through all their socials, their websites. And again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. There's just some
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much on behalf of WorkInCulture as well. Really appreciate the time you took to spend your Saturday with us. So thanks again, and we hope to connect with you in the future for any other programming or panels that we do. Please stay in touch, and thank you for all who joined us today. I know it's hard to do these kinds of webinars and online workshops on a beautiful Saturday like today. So thanks for those who joined us. And this panel is also recorded, so we'll have it available through our social media platforms as well. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you too. Thank you.